Hey, thanks for listening to Authentically Raw. I'm excited to announce that my book, Results Daily Planning and Self Development, is for sale on Amazon and on my website at jamieberris.com. It's the perfect blend of a daily planner with hourly schedule. It has wellness journal prompts to help you develop yourself personally, professionally, and relationally while strengthening your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health and well being. It's the ultimate life planner. It guides you along your journey to design and manifest the life you desire with clarity and confidence, one day at a time. Also, on my website, jamieberris.com, you can click on the freebie tab and download a free ebook. It is the best of the best of the planner and wellness prompts. It has goal setting, habit formation, vision boards, you name it, it's in there. About 50 or so pages. Download it for free and it is yours. If you leave a review of this podcast or the book, snap a screenshot, email it to me, jamie@jamieberris.com, and you will receive a free coaching session. As always, I'm rooting for you. Be real, be raw, be authentic. Dr. Morgan Nolte, how are you?
I'm pretty well. How are you?
I'm great. Welcome to the Authentically Raw podcast. And I will do a brief introduction, but I will let you take it away. You are I hope I get this right, a certified clinical geriatric physical therapist, correct?
I think there's probably 5 different ways to say it. Yep. So I'm certified in geriatric physical therapy. I'm a specialist in that.
Okay, so and that might be a little confusing. I don't want it to go right over people's heads. So yeah, tell us a little bit about that, exactly what that entails, but then lead us into where you are, what you do now.
Yeah. So being a geriatric clinical specialist means you're kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to working with adults 55 and over. I know that some people listening are like, 55, I'm not geriatric. And it's like, yeah. Well, if you're pregnant and you're 35, you're geriatric. So it's just, a medical cutoff. But what that means is that I got really good at working with people with multiple comorbidities like diabetes, heart disease, dementia, osteoarthritis, falls, sarcopenia, and it was heartbreaking. I mean, straight up, I worked in post-acute rehab. So if people went to the hospital, but then they weren't strong enough to go home and they had to stay in rehab for several weeks or months, I'd work with them there. And then after that, I moved into the home care setting. So I'd work with them for home. And every single time I worked with someone who was 70 or 80 or 90 and they had, advanced diabetes and complications from diabetes, I thought, I wish that I could have worked with you 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And I wish that we could expand beyond exercise, because in order to prevent this condition, because type 2 diabetes is preventable, it is reversible up to a certain stage. I think that we could have put our resources and our energy to such better use, right? I think that in today's medical system, it's all about reactive care. It's not health care, it's sick care. Like you go to the doctor when you're sick or when you have a problem or when you're ill. And I think that our healthcare system is set up very well for that, but it's not set up very well for disease prevention. Neither is our society. Just go to like Walmart and look in the average person's grocery cart. You're going to see it's loaded with sugar. It's loaded with processed food. And so I was just really tired of feeling like we were doing services that were too little too late. And I saw so many adult children who were caretakers of their parents following in their same footsteps. And I thought, who is helping you? You're like in this gray zone of healthcare. You're in your 50s, maybe your 60s, and your health is suffering clearly. And I don't know that you know what to do about it. And so I left traditional healthcare. I left physical therapy to start my business, Zivly. And what Zivly means is to live a low insulin and low inflammation lifestyle, because that really gets to the root cause of what caused all of this diabetic related disease, and that's insulin resistance. So insulin resistance is really my clinical passion now, the prevention of it, the reversal of it, because it's at the root cause of the diabetes, of the heart disease, of dementia, of osteoarthritis, of some forms of cancer. So I feel like if I can help you live this lifestyle that helps keep your insulin levels and your inflammation levels low, we kill the most birds with one stone. And for me, that's just frankly more satisfying work. I feel like I'm now on the preventative side of things, impacting people's quality of life and length of life.
Oh, wow. I have so many questions. First, I do want to throw out there because I think this will shape a little bit of our conversation too. So, out of, like my four grandparents, they've all passed now. Three of them developed type 2 diabetes. And absolutely, lifestyle was
Mhm.
the factor to that, for sure, which is the case with type 2 diabetes, not just in their eating, but drinking, whether it was a cans of Coke or
Mhm.
alcohol. But I know mindset and just being sedentary, so many things. And I want to throw this out there too, just because if I don't remember it, I know you will. The autoimmune disease I know can play like a factor as far as the development of it. Cortisol, I'm thinking of just not managing our stress and having anxiety, so many things. This is just all popping in my head. There's so much. One of my grandmas, she did have her leg amputated from her knee
Mm.
down. There's a lot there, so I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I do want to throw that out there because obviously there's a huge interest on my part too for my health. I'm not overweight. I don't eat a ton of sugar and things, but I do know that I'm genetically predisposed to it, this, as so many people are. And so many people
Mhm.
think, well, I'm not overweight. I'm fine. I don't eat a ton of sugar. They think, oh, the cookies, the pop, this and that. But our diets are filled with hidden sugars and all the prepackaged processed junk and food that we eat.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can't wait to send this one just to my family, my husband and my kids. I'm gonna make them listen to this episode. Um, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. We'll get down that route. But first, I have a whole list of questions, and I do want to ask right off the bat for our listeners, to break some of this down because maybe there's even terms and things. I mean, even just me throwing out cortisol, or things like that.
Right.
Like people don't know a lot of these things. So I want to make it really simple that everybody understands a lot of things. But I do want to start out first. What are some of the common signs and symptoms of insulin resistance, that might be that we just dismiss or, just I want to stop there. What are some of those signs and symptoms?
Yeah, sure. Well, the first would be elevated blood sugar levels. So if you're pre-diabetic or you're type 2 diabetic, you absolutely 100% have insulin resistance. They are one and the same. I like to say that insulin resistance is almost like a train track, and then the train itself is just your blood sugar levels. Like even if you have healthy blood sugar levels, you may still have some degree of insulin resistance. And that's why it's important to check your fasting insulin, not just your fasting blood sugar or your hemoglobin A1C, because a fasting insulin level can predict type 2 diabetes 10 to 20 years before a fasting glucose or hemoglobin A1C. So that train is just, once you get to that pre-diabetic level of blood sugar levels, you've been insulin resistant. You've had high levels of insulin for a decade, probably. And it's gone unnoticed because your doctor's not checking insulin. And then that train it just goes along the track till you get type 2 diabetes and farther and farther. So high blood sugar levels, number one sign, but there's so many others. So high blood pressure is often one of the very first signs of insulin resistance for many people, even before high blood sugars. Many people, the first medication they go on is a high blood pressure medication before statins, before high blood sugar medications. Another one is excess weight or weight loss resistance. It doesn't always have to be according to the BMI. Like you could be something called skinny fat. So especially if you have more belly fat around the midsection, that can be a sign of insulin resistance. Some others would be skin tags. So like little flaps of skin, they're very common around the neck. That's one sign. Another would be a skin condition called acanthosis nigricans, which is like a thick, velvety, dark skin that's often in folds. So like the groin, the armpits, under the breasts, sometimes in the neck crease. Those are some of the more common ones, but just symptoms might even be sugar cravings, carb cravings. You feel like you're hungry all the time. And we want to be paying attention to these, and fatigue, especially like if you're low energy or if your energy is going up and down throughout the day, that could be a sign of insulin resistance. And we don't just want to attribute this to getting older, because that's what a lot of people do. And then they miss their opportunity to really intervene and help. So insulin resistance, there's so much we can do about it. We'll talk about today, but it's important. Number one, if the only thing you take away from today is check your fasting insulin level, please. You can get it. We have an at-home test on our website. Your doctor may be willing to order it for you. You could go to testing.com and order one for yourself. So there's 3 different ways to check your insulin.
It's a prick of the finger, right? It's blood.
Our at-home test is, yep.
Okay.
And then sometimes if your doctor's ordering it, they might just add it on to like a standard panel. So then you're probably getting your blood drawn. They're putting it in a tube, setting it in. But ours is just a finger prick. And then you put it on a piece of paper and you send it into the lab.
And it's important too that it has to be the fasting insulin,
Yes.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
So you
Yep.
mentioned that, and I had jotted this down too, because I had listened to a couple of your other podcasts that you were on, and you mentioned like the hemoglobin A1C.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like a downstream. Tell me about that. Explain that more.
Yeah. So if you think about blood sugar management and the role of insulin, insulin's job is to keep your blood sugar levels stable. There's something in your body called homeostasis, which means it likes to have a stable, balanced level of everything. And when we eat something like we eat, we'll say a bagel or a donut that has a lot of sugar, a lot of carbohydrates, that's going to spike your blood glucose levels, because the glucose molecules, the carbohydrates in the food, glucose is a type of carbohydrate. When you eat that, it's quickly broken down, and those glucose molecules are released into your bloodstream, which directly raises your blood glucose levels. What happens then is your insulin release, or your pancreas releases insulin. And insulin's job is essentially to get that sugar from your bloodstream into storage to be either used as energy or, more likely than not, stored for later use. And so over time, what happens is your blood sugar goes up, insulin goes up, and then your blood sugar comes down and insulin comes down. But if you're not careful and you're just repeatedly hammering that pancreas over and over, demanding insulin, your cells are going to become resistant to the effects of insulin. So think about an alcoholic, how they get a buzz after like 2 drinks, but then 5 years later, it takes 5 drinks or 8 drinks to get the same effect. The same is with insulin. So over time, you need more and more insulin to get the same blood sugar stabilizing effects, because your cells have essentially tuned it out. All right. But what we often measure, instead of the insulin rising in the background behind, for decades behind the scenes, is we're measuring fasting glucose and hemoglobin A1C. And hemoglobin A1C is a 3-month estimate of your blood sugar levels. And those are really downstream effects of your blood sugar regulation, of your degree of insulin resistance. So the root cause is really insulin resistance at the cellular level, but you can't understand what that is at all. I mean, you can tell if you have it, like if you're in a pre-diabetic or diabetic range with glucose and hemoglobin A1C, but you cannot tell if you're in a normal range if you're also insulin resistant. So we want to check that upstream fasting insulin, not the downstream effect of like blood sugar, because it's only after you've been insulin resistant for 10, 20 years that you finally start to see that glucose and A1C coming up. It's a downstream effect.
So 2-part question then is, really exactly, for someone that's really never heard of insulin resistant, like what exactly is the definition of that? And then on the tails of that, what's the difference then between like the insulin resistance, the pre-diabetes, and the type 2 diabetes?
Yeah. So insulin resistance is simply when your cells are resistant to the effects of insulin. So it's resistant to the blood sugar lowering effects, and nutrients have a harder time getting into the cells. That's why one of the symptoms is excess hunger, especially for carbohydrates, for that fast energy. It's like the sugar's in the blood, but it's not getting into the cells very effectively because they're tuning out insulin, which is supposed to be letting the nutrients in. So then the second thing is, what's the difference between insulin resistance, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes? They're exactly the same thing. It's just the degree of severity. So kind of like that train on the railroad track. The track is insulin resistance. It's just like, are we stopping in Omaha or are we stopping at LA? Like Omaha's, if we're going from New York, that's healthy blood sugar. Omaha's prediabetes, LA is type 2 diabetes, but it's all insulin resistance.
It's just where you are on your journey. Not a good journey, right? You do not want to reach the destination of
get on a different track. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So when we get tested and we get these results, what are the ranges, where we want to be, and exactly when you go in to get tested or you get tested, what exactly should we be looking for in the test? Because I even know, I'm 49, so I've had, the hormone panels done and things like that, where I've been told, make sure you ask the doctor for the full panel, because otherwise they only check for T this, T that, or, so it can be confusing because you go for the tests at your doctor and they're really not testing for all of the things. So what are all of the things and all of the ranges that we want to see?
Well, I won't go into all of them because I think that this isn't the most helpful platform for that, because I think people really do need to see it on a piece of paper. I will send you a link for a free resource I have called the Health Data Tracker, and that has everything spelled out. It has the optimal numbers for everything, and then it has a place that people can fill in. I will say from an insulin standpoint, from a fasting insulin standpoint, we want to see that less than 6 ideally. And then from a blood sugar and an A1C standpoint, I'm seeing more and more labs completely ignoring and doctors completely ignoring pre-diabetic levels. So a fasting blood sugar, in my opinion, of greater than 90 is kind of that cutoff of like, ooh, we're creeping up towards that pre-diabetic range, which is like 100 or greater fasting. So we want to tighten that up a little bit. And then a hemoglobin A1C of greater than 5.5, maybe 5.6, but 5.5 is kind of considered that optimal cutoff. To me, that's evidence, ooh, we need to tighten things up a little bit. But I have seen lab reports where what was the glucose level was well in the pre-diabetic range. I don't remember what it was, but it didn't flag it at all. It just said normal. So I think that some labs are not reporting pre-diabetic levels, and that's why it's really important for you to like know your own numbers. And if you want to do that, I'm hoping you'll just put the link, then people can download that. You can Google like what are the cutoffs for pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. But we have a couple other things on there. So we have like HSCRP, which is for low-grade chronic inflammation. We like to see that less than 1. That's typically not on a standard blood panel either. So there's just a couple things like that I recommend people get checked that might not be checked regularly.
I mean, the simple thing too is just to monitor your blood pressure, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing higher than 120/80.
Yep.
About it. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm glad that they tightened those up. I feel like in healthcare today, we're loosening up regulations because the norm is to be sick. And a lot of these labs are reporting on averages. And it's like, well, if the average person is sick, then that doesn't help us very much. So
Right.
yeah, for blood pressure, less than 120/80 is desired. Yep.
Does cholesterol play a factor or no?
Oh, that's another can of worms. I have some videos on YouTube that explains the difference between LDL particle numbers, which is like the vehicles carrying the cholesterol, and then LDL cholesterol. So there's a difference. Like some people are worried about high cholesterol levels.
Mhm.
And I like to say that that's not something that should be of concern of them. Like we really want to focus on your LDL particle number and your LDL particle size. So if you think about it, I was trying to explain this. I'm like, how do I explain this easily to somebody? If you're sitting on a dock and you're at a small lake, if you think about, okay, how likely is it that a dock would get damaged if there were 100 boats on the water on this small lake versus like 5 boats, right? So 100 boats would represent like 100 LDL particle numbers. 5 boats would represent 5 LDL particle numbers. And let's say we have 100 people on the lake. So you could have 1 person per boat, which is going to be calculated as like, they're the same, essentially the same cholesterol level, or 20 people on 5 boats. It's the boats that matter. It's the LDL particle number and size that matters for your cardiovascular risk, not your LDL-C or your calculated cholesterol levels. And this has been pretty well proven in the research, but unfortunately it takes a long time for research to trickle down. I think last I checked was like 17 to 24 years for the evidence to trickle down into actual clinical practice. And so I like to say your doctor could be dead or retired by then. So for that, I would recommend the NMR lipoprofile test. People can just Google NMR lipoprofile test. Last I checked, it was $99. They could order it themselves, go into a lab, have it drawn. That's going to tell you your LDL particle number and size so that you know your risk for cardiovascular disease so much better than total cholesterol or LDL cholesterol, because those really are not meaningful indicators of your risk anymore. And I don't know when the bodies that be, like the American Diabetes Association and American Heart Association, are going to step up to the plate and admit that they've been wrong about that. But they are wrong about that. And it's causing a lot of people to be taking statins that may not need them. Like, if you don't have a high LDL particle number, if you don't have a high Lp(a), which is another genetic marker for cardiovascular disease that is on that health data tracker form, that's a real conversation to have with your doctor. Like, hey, what are the risks and benefits of this statin and what's right for me? Because unfortunately, some medications, such as statins, contribute to insulin resistance. Some blood pressure medications do as well, some antipsychotics. And I like to say anything that you're consistently putting into your body will develop this baseline level where you can't get any better than that. And so you're not going to get any less insulin resistant if there are certain medications you're taking that are bumping up that level of insulin resistance in your body. So I'm a big fan, just as a geriatric physical therapist, to reduce the number of medications as much as possible, because they're not a natural substance to put in your body. It's just, I've had people with over 30 medications on their med list, and I'm like, how are they still alive? How do you even keep track of this many medications? So yeah, cholesterol is a whole nother can of worms. I do have some in-depth YouTube videos on it if people want to dig a little bit deeper into that. But the bottom line is total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol are not meaningful indicators of your risk for heart disease, but your LDL particle number, and some would also argue your size, are good indicators.
That's fascinating. And I think too, I don't know if this is true, but I have heard even with blood pressure medication, once you're on it, it's really bad to ever get off of it. I don't know where that comes from. But in another thought on all of what you were just talking about.
Because it depends on the person, right? Like, if they're making lifestyle changes, it could be dangerous not to get off of it. I always say, like, once you start to change your diet, be on the lookout for signs of low blood pressure and low blood sugar if you're taking a medication, because the medication could be at too high of a dosage for your new lifestyle. And this happened with one of our members. She kind of told her doctor, like, hey, I'm changing my lifestyle. Can we reduce my med? Of course, they're like, no. Then she almost passes out because her blood pressure is so low because her medication's overshooting. And then the doctor took her off the medication. So it is very important to be in communication with your physician and be regularly checking your data. I think daily blood pressure checks are awesome. I think it's very wise to ask your doctor, say, hey, is there a hold point for this medication? Like, should I not take this medication if my blood pressure is lower than a certain number on the top or a certain number on the bottom? That's going to help prevent low blood pressure episodes. And then same thing goes with blood sugar. hey doc, should I not take my blood sugar medication if my blood sugar is already at a certain level so that we don't, go too low? Because it's scary. My dad's a type 2 diabetic. My mom called me one time and he had taken his medication and then like forgotten to eat. And it was almost like he was having a stroke. Like he was slumped over at the kitchen table. He was slurring his words. He was irritable. He was lethargic. He was like glazed over in his eyes, and his blood sugar was like in the 40s because he took his medication without eating. So there can be some very dangerous side effects with low blood pressure, with low blood sugar, and we want to be on the lookout for those.
Definitely. And I feel that, I mean, let's face it, and this is a whole nother can of worms, but let's face it, the medical system now, it's because, with all the drugs and medications, I mean, these prescription drugs, it's a gazillion $1 billion business, and it's
Sure
really
is.
easy to write scripts. And the sicker we are, there's money to be made. I
Yep.
mean, and I think that keeping that in our mindset, to me, just empowers me to want to live a better lifestyle. I don't want to just be stuck on all of these, meds or whatever, because it's not curing anything. It's not reversing anything. And is it really making you feel better and have a better quality of life? No, it's really not. So I think anything preventative, absolutely. I do have a couple questions here about explaining the different, or how insulin resistance is, this is so fascinating to me, is emerging as a central cause of Alzheimer's, which is now often referred to as type 3 diabetes. Let's talk about
It's
that.
sad, first of all. Like I think most people listening know somebody with Alzheimer's disease. The best book that I've read on this is Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind by Dr. Georgia Ede. I've had her on my podcast. She's just a very gracious guest and very smart. And she is a nutritional psychiatrist. So she works with a lot of people who have ADHD, autism, schizophrenia, bipolar, and she essentially puts them on a ketogenic diet and watches their depression, a lot of depression, anxiety, watches their mind change, because when your brain is insulin resistant, it can't utilize glucose very well for energy, which is its primary fuel source. And so if it can't utilize glucose very well for energy, you're not going to have a lot of energy. You're not going to have clear thoughts. You're going to have brain fog. But when you're following a more ketogenic diet, you use ketones for energy. Most parts of your brain can use ketones, and ketones don't require insulin to be used as energy like glucose does, right? Like the glucose has to have insulin bind to a cell receptor to let the glucose in, but ketones aren't like that. Ketones work independent of insulin. So it's almost like this entire backup fuel source for your brain.
Okay.
So the way Dr. Ede described it in her book, again, that's Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind, is that there's 3 primary contributors to Alzheimer's disease that's coming through the research. And it's inflammation, it's oxidative stress, and insulin resistance. And I think if you really think about it, that explains about every single cause or contributor to Alzheimer's disease or cognitive impairment, at least that I've been exposed to. And when you're thinking about insulin resistance, you think about somebody who's diabetic. I mean, it is crazy, the correlation between diabetes and cognitive impairment. But then you take somebody like my grandma, who has great blood sugar levels, but she's frail. She doesn't have a lot of muscle mass, and she's drank her whole life. And I think that she's been dehydrated most of her life, undernourished from a protein standpoint. Okay, so what's her cause of cognitive impairment? Because she's now mild, she's at that mild cognitive impairment level. And I would say, well, inflammation from a diet that's high in sugar. She just likes to eat, sugar stuff sometimes. But more importantly, oxidative stress from the chronic alcohol use that she's had. And it's not like she's an alcoholic, but she's probably a daily alcohol drinker for most of her life. And so it doesn't always just have to be insulin resistance, but that is one of the 3 primary causes of Alzheimer's disease.
Okay. So that oxidative stress, that's pretty fancy. What
Yeah.
exactly is that? Recap that one.
Any form of cellular stress. So if people want to look into it more, they can Google like forms of oxidative stress. But one thing would be like smoking, alcohol, any cellular stress, secondhand smoke. Um, I feel like inflammation and oxidative stress often go hand in hand. Um, Sometimes they say like the refined seed oils like canola oil, soybean oil, those can be a cause of the inflammation and oxidative stress in your cells as well. A high sugar diet. But I do think that the primary ones that come to my mind would be like smoking, alcohol, and then probably some chemicals as well.
Okay. Wow. So as far as our diet of, what we eat, what we consume, I cringe because I want to say I was I was college age. So, early 20s, we'll just say it was the big fad was the no fat diet, which basically meant shove carbs, sugar in your body because there's no fat in that. I mean, you can eat a bag of licorice, there's no fat in it, right?
Yep.
But it was the granolas, the breads, the pastas, all of this kind of stuff. And I can remember from a health standpoint, I've always been a health nut. I want to exercise, I want to eat right, I want to do all these things right. And you thought you were doing the right thing. And it is crazy because I can remember being constantly lightheaded. I can remember passing out. That was a great, first couple of dates. I mean, he stuck around. He's my husband now, but I passed out while we were waiting, at a food place once. But, that don't eat meat, all of these fad diets or things like that, how that's all we need to hear because I think we get so fixated on our weight, what our bodies look like and how you even mentioned early, the skinny fat type of thing. Or, I mean, just because you may be of a healthy weight, I'm putting that in quotes for anyone that's not watching on video, doesn't mean you're healthy at all. But I can honestly say, I'm a carnivore, I think, at heart. I love meat. I feel so much better when I'm eating steak and chicken and eating salmon and cod and shrimp and, nuts and avocados and all of these things. And I'm so glad that I eat that now, or didn't, that fat of the high carbs, which is basically sugar, that's out the window. But a lot of people, have the mindset, from then or from wherever about, eating meat and some of these high fat diets. Talk to us a little bit about that. To, I guess, maybe kind of just have them see a new approach or be open-minded.
Yeah, I think it goes down to like the caloric versus the insulin model of obesity. And I think that there's room for both. But when we're thinking about the low fat diet, everybody was so worried about calories because there's 9 calories per gram of fat versus only 4 for protein and 2 to 4 for carbohydrates, depending on the source. But when we're talking about an insulin model, that flips it on its head because calories from healthy fats have the lowest insulin and blood sugar response out of all of them. So if you're having an avocado, if you're having some eggs that have some fat in them, if you're having nuts, you will see a very minimal rise in your blood sugar if you're wearing a continuous glucose monitor. They don't make continuous insulin monitors yet. I am so excited for the day. So we can't measure that, but you wouldn't see a rise in insulin.
It was your next invention.
Yeah. Protein has a moderate insulin response, and I'm a big advocate for a high protein diet to support your muscle health. If you want good insulin sensitivity, you need muscle mass. That's why athletes can eat pretty much whatever they want and not gain weight because they're so active. They have so much muscle mass. They eat a ton of protein. Your muscle is almost like your deposit for where your glucose goes after the meal before it's shuttled off into fat stores. So the more muscle you have, the more carbohydrates you can tolerate without becoming insulin resistant. So protein, very important macronutrient, moderate insulin response, minimal blood sugar response. And then carbohydrates, the fibrous carbohydrates that are low in starches and sugars will actually slow any blood sugar or insulin response of whatever else you're eating in the meal. And so that's why I'm a big fan of like non-starchy vegetables, like broccoli, celery, some carrots, some cucumbers, bell peppers. I try to include those in my diet a lot. And not such a big fan of the starchy vegetables like the corn, the potatoes. If I have those, I have them in smaller portions. Not such a big fan of especially refined carbohydrates, the crackers, the cereal, the cookies, the ice cream, the sugary stuff. It's going to spike your blood sugar, and whatever spikes your blood sugar spikes your insulin. But here's the tricky part is I think that people have a lot of false beliefs about what is healthy. I mean, think about, the Subway guy, like was his name Jason or something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Jared.
Back in the day, I lost so many pounds eating Subway. Well, I'll tell you what, I had a Subway sandwich Sunday, and it was a 6-inch double turkey, cheese, all the veggies. And I'd never had it with a continuous glucose monitor on. Not something that I have all the time, but I was just like, it's pretty sensible. And I'm kind of an expert in this. So I was really shocked. My blood sugar went from 94 to 174 after I ate that sandwich. And I thought, holy moly, how many people like myself we think you're eating sensibly, and then behind the scenes your blood sugar is spiking, your insulin is spiking. And I guarantee there's so many women out there having their Special K for cereal, like for breakfast, or another cereal or oatmeal, deficient in protein, spiking their blood sugar first thing in the morning. Maybe they're topping it with a banana. So I think that wearing a continuous glucose monitor is the best thing that we have thus far to help us understand how different foods impact our insulin, because the ones that spike your blood sugar are going to be contributing to insulin resistance if you continually eat them over and over. The ones that don't are going to be healthier choices. So protein, fiber, fat, that's going to be how we structure the meals. And then from a dosing standpoint, I think at least 30 grams of high quality protein per meal is essential. So if you're looking at your hand, if it's like cut up meat or scrambled eggs, I try to make the portion the size of my hand. And then like a lot of people just say the palm there, and that's not okay. From a protein standpoint, you really want to have the size of your hand. So if you don't have a food scale, or if you don't want to track your macronutrients, if you're cutting up your steak, you're cutting up your chicken, put it like a good size of protein on your plate, and then put an equal size of non-starchy vegetables on your plate. Put some healthy fats on there, the avocados, maybe some cheese or some nuts. You're going to be far more satiated than if you just have like a bowl of cereal. But that's very important from a nutrition standpoint. Prioritize protein, fiber, healthy fats. Minimize unhealthy seed oils like the canola oil, the soybean oil. Minimize sugars, minimize refined starches. It's not to say I never have them. I do. It's just it's in moderation, and they're in their place. And then when I have them, I always try to go for a walk afterwards, because when your muscles are working, they're actively using that glucose so that it reduces that blood sugar spike.
Like, one thing I always tell myself and my kids is eat real food. I think we live in a day and age where people survive on the packaged, processed, or it's not even real food. I mean, did it grow on a tree? Did it grow out of the ground? Did it walk? Did it swim?
Yeah.
If it did, eat it, right? And I think it's about, we have to really stop and think a little bit about what is truly healthy. A pretzel is not healthy. Tell me what's healthy about it. I mean, all they have to do is slap whole grain on a granola bar. It's a glorified candy bar, people. Come on.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
or they say everything that's not in it, like cholesterol free, fat free. But then if you look on the back, you have to look at the food labels, specifically the ingredients and the added sugar. Like there was one Cliff protein bar that had on the front, it marketed 20 grams of protein, but then on the back there was 20 grams of added sugar. And I'm like, well, that's not marketed on the front now, is it?
It's terrible, terrible. And I think I don't think. I know the more you eat that stuff, especially the sugar and everything, the more you crave it. I
It's
mean,
true.
sugar is just as addictive as cocaine. I've
Yes.
heard that 1,000 times. And
Yep.
and not to mention, I get so moody and irritable if I eat a lot of sugar. I mean, the claws come out, and I find I do overindulge a little bit. The month of December, you're baking more, people are bringing things over, the parties, the cocktails, things like this, but it catches up. And I think so many people, though, they live this way where they're consuming this stuff all the time
Yeah.
that they don't know any different. It becomes your new normal.
Yeah.
And you don't make that connection. And when you just give your body the freedom to just kind of release and detox from some of that for even 2 weeks, if you just tell yourself, eat real food, because I hate to put restrictions on things too, because the more you restrict yourself and you have this list in your head, I can't have this, I can't have this, I can't have this, the more you crave it, the more you want it. I mean, that's just,
Human.
it's like being a kid. The more rules you have, the more you want to just rebel and do what you want to do. And I think it's really helpful to just open up everything you can have, because there's so much that is really healthy for you and that tastes really good. And the more you eat that, the more your body craves that, the better you feel. Like, give your body a chance to feel good. All these aches and these pains and being tired and irritable and, just we can't think, we've got the brain fog. All of these things have such a correlation to what we put in our body. We're so used to putting junk in our body and feeling like junk every day. And you just want to help people do something good, put something good in your body, and, exercise and all of these lifestyle changes make such a big difference. And it's baby steps. It doesn't have to be all at once,
Right.
but
No.
even looking at our diet, and I hate to go down the route of, oh, what can I take away? Because it's more about what I can add. But for everything you take away, think about what you can add. I'm going to take, if you're a pop drinker, or you eat a bagel for breakfast. Okay, or maybe a better thing is, what can I replace things with? So
Yep.
can I replace that bagel with, and if I'm in a rush, I'll slice an avocado in half. I just grab a spoon, mash it up, and I eat half avocado. It's the 30-second breakfast, so there's no excuses of, I don't have time to eat healthy. That is such a lame excuse. It is so easy to grab a piece of fruit. It is so easy to grab a handful of carrots, or make extra broccoli, or grill extra chicken or extra steaks, and keep that and literally throw it in a bowl with some lettuce. Oh, and you call that a salad? It takes 30 seconds. But it's forming new habits, forming new lifestyles. And yeah, it doesn't have to be all done at once, but it's looking at it as, what can I add to my body? What can I eat that's real food? And I don't know. I love the little mantras every day, because I hate it when people, all these rules, but it's be looking for ways that you can just be healthier, because it is a lifestyle. It is forever. It's not about getting these levels down, to a number, and then going back to old habits,
Right.
or losing the weight and then I can start eating this again. It's a lot of things like that. I don't know if you have any comments or tricks or
Yeah,
tools.
I'd say start with one. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of like 1 to 3 action items at a time. So if I would look at, what am I doing on a daily basis that I'm not even thinking about? Like, what coffee creamer am I using? What ketchup am I using? I used the peppermint mocha coffee creamer from Coffee Mate for a long time. I was getting 20 grams of added sugar in my coffee every morning just from my coffee creamer. And so what you can do instead is half and half peppermint extract and a couple drops of stevia, and like maybe some cocoa powder in there. It tastes exactly the same. Or you could do just half and half and some cinnamon and almond extract, or half and half and pumpkin pie spice. Like, you can use different ingredients with no added sugar and make a positive change. You can buy the Primal Kitchen ketchup that has no added sugar. You can buy pop alternatives, not diet pop that has all the artificial colors and artificial sweeteners, but like try some of those sparkling waters. I'm with you that the more sweet stuff we have, even if it's the stevia, the monk fruit, the more natural ones, the more you're going to want. But sometimes if you just want like a pop, like Zevias are not a bad option. The poppies aren't a bad option. The Olipop, they're all going to be on a good, better, best continuum. So I would say start to look at your choices and say, okay, this is my current choice. What is a better choice that I could make? And then what's the best choice that I could make here? And then just start with 1 to 3 habits a day. And the way that we teach it is we have a Zibli habit hierarchy where the first 2 habits we teach you to implement are mindset related, because if you have a stronger mindset, everything's going to be easier. And then we talk about sleep. We want you to sleep in 7 to 8 hours a night, because if you have a strong mindset and you're sleeping, everything's going to be easier. Then the 4th habit is water. Like, how many people are not drinking enough water? So many. But if you're drinking water, you're sleeping, and you have a good mindset, everything else is easier. Then we work into the nutrition, like protein, fiber, because so many people, they go to cutting the carbs, but that's very difficult to sustain if you're not properly fueling and hydrating and resting your body. So I think order of implementation does help. And sometimes people go for like more extreme measures when maybe let's focus on your sleep and mindset and water first, and ease into the dietary changes. So just to throw that out there.
No, exactly. And I think for me, I mean, there's a lot of triggers, some people eat a lot of carbs or sweets or things or overeat or whatever. It could be stress related, or they're sad, or they're whatever. I 100% know my trigger is if I'm tired. First, I want something sweet. Then I want something salty. Then it's like that afternoon. If I feel that afternoon dip, that afternoon crash, that is the first craving. And I know it's coming. And so when it happens, I have a plan. What are you going to do? Go for something that's protein and then brush your teeth. I mean, that's what I do. One thing about that too is, again, is why it's so important to get sleep. So you don't constantly, go for that sugar or the coffees that are full of sugar and caramel and chocolate and whipped cream. I mean, hello, people. It's a hot fudge and caramel sundae that you're drinking, and you're just saying, no, it's just a coffee. Well, you're eating. Would you go to, the Dairy Queen and get that and eat that every day? But you probably not, maybe so, but you're doing that with all of those coffees too. And one other thing, it reminded me with water, I do this, I'm really good about this in the summer, and in the winter, sometimes it just sounds too cold, but I will fill my water with frozen fruit. Yeah, like frozen blueberries, frozen chunks of mango or things like that. And it gives it that little bit of flavor. Because I feel like that in the middle of the afternoon, like I drink water all day. In the middle of the afternoon, I want something with flavor, and it's like, what do I have? And so I found that is one of those things. And then at the end, after you drink your water, you can eat the frozen fruit, right?
That's a nice, I like that idea.
I like that one. One thing I do want to ask, because I was listening to one of your podcasts and you brought up PCOS. So for our listeners, that's polycystic ovarian syndrome. So back in my 20s, when my husband and I were deciding to first start a family, I wasn't getting pregnant. But I should actually go backwards. This is going down, let's see, I want to say I was 18. I basically stopped having a period. So, or I would get it maybe once or twice a year. I've always been a big runner. They said, oh, just stop exercising, all of these sort of things. Looking back now, I'll fast forward. We have 4 kids, so obviously we got some things worked out. I won't go into like how we didn't do in vitro or anything like that. One thing that I drastically changed, besides them giving me just some hormones and things like that, but one thing I drastically changed was my diet. So a couple of things, it kind of goes back to that, back in your 20s or late teens of the no fat, eating all the carbs and all that sugar. I know that had a lot to do with it. Personally, I can't have a lot of dairy. It really upsets my stomach. But over the years, overhauling my diet from, what I thought was healthy to really what is healthy and what works for me. I'll fast forward. I'm going through all kinds of decades here, but I'm 49 now. And I want to say when I was like probably mid 40s, about 45, I finally started getting periods again all by myself, which is like kind of crazy because now over the past probably 2 years, I have been regular basically for the first time in my life.
That's
Let's
wild.
explain that. And I do think, though, diet has a ton to do with it. But I also know like a mental, emotional health, all of these things play a part. And I was always told, oh, you're probably going to end up with type 2 diabetes and all of this. So I would just even with what I said on there, I mean, I barely basically, kind of surface covered some things, but your thoughts on things like, say, PCOS. And then I kind of want to go into like, the mindset stuff a little bit too.
Yeah, well, I don't get super into the physiology. I think people can look that up, but there's an absolute correlation between polycystic ovarian syndrome and insulin resistance. And many women with PCOS have undiagnosed insulin resistance. And when they start to adopt those lifestyle changes that we've been talking about, their PCOS gets better and they're able to conceive. And men too, like a symptom of insulin resistance we didn't cover is erectile dysfunction. And I don't know about you, but man, I'm pregnant with our third child, and we know so many people with infertility issues. And I think that you'll never convince me otherwise that a lot of it is lifestyle related, whether that's dietary or chemical or stress, like what we were talking about. But PCOS is another condition that has insulin resistance at that root cause level. And so if there's somebody listening and they're struggling with infertility, they might have PCOS, please, please, please check your fasting insulin. Look up like insulin resistance and PCOS, read about it, and do your due diligence. Like eat in the way that we're talking about eating, get your sleep, hydrate, moderate your stress, because all of those things will not only help you set up better to conceive and carry a child, but to take care of that child. Because the better you take care of yourself, the better you're going to be able to take care of your kids. I can tell you that, like, hand on a Bible, like, absolutely.
Definitely. And it's crazy too, because, when I was diagnosed with PCOS, I had been in emergency with ovarian cysts. Obviously I couldn't get pregnant, but I never menstruated. I was basically told, you have the estrogen of an 85-year-old woman. And this was when I was like 25, 26 years old. But there was nothing like, okay, here's your next step. Nothing ever. It was, okay, so if you need to have a period at least every 3 months. So we're either going to give you this hormone or you can take a pack of birth control pills. And so if you're trying to get pregnant, obviously don't take any birth control pills. So they'd prescribe me some progesterone, and, I had 2 children, and then 6 years later I had 2 more. So the story with that one was number 3 took a little bit more work. Number 4, my body all of a sudden decided to start working, and surprise.
Okay.
That was my well, actually, according to what I laughed because we talked about geriatric pregnancies and things like that. So my third baby I had at 35, geriatric pregnancy, and my fourth baby I had at 38, geriatric pregnancy, just lovely. But I think I did so much. I like to just kind of sum it up like mind, body, spirit, wellness work on myself over the years. And now I look at this, it's like I have reversed that PCOS. I'm getting periods. It's crazy because all my friends are going through menopause and not. And I'm like, I do everything backwards. Right?
Yeah. Now you're getting your period.
Yeah, right. But it's so empowering to be able to take control of your health yourself, and, really reverse some of these things and really feel the benefits though. Like I feel better than I did in my 20s. I feel way better than I did in my 30s. And I think that's from a physical standpoint, but also from, a mental standpoint of like, how do I handle anxiety? How do I handle stress? And all of these sort of things. It's all the total package, because I don't feel like it's not just our diet and just our exercise that can reverse or slow down some of these things. It is meditating, it's time alone in nature, or, with prayer, it's so much more.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And we mentioned cortisol earlier. So cortisol is one of those stress hormones that will raise your blood sugar levels, and anything that raises blood sugar raises insulin. So
Mhm.
I think if we're not Dr. Jason Fung in his book, The Obesity Code, has a great line. He's like, stress contains neither calories nor carbohydrates, but contributes to obesity. And
Oh,
it's true. And I think that there are so many things. It's almost like, you know how you're talking, like people just eat junk and it's like they don't even recognize how bad they feel because that's their normal state. I think we consume junk through social media, through the news, through our own thoughts. And so I think we all have this rhythm of life, like this emotional set point that we don't understand all the time, that we have the power to raise. And there are tools to help us with that. And it's never going to be perfect. It is
yeah.
always a work in progress. And in my opinion, the goal of this mental work is to be calm, to be positive, to be resilient, and to be in a constant state of growth, so that I spend as little time as possible in negativity or worry or doubt or self-criticism or anything like that, because honestly, those are pointless. And
Mhm.
those emotions often drive emotional eating. And I mean, it's just a fact. Like, I think so many people use food not as fuel, but as a coping mechanism when they're tired, sad, stressed, lonely, mad, bored. And when we learn how to deal with those emotions in a way that doesn't involve food, it really sets our future health up for success. Um, so yeah, we were kind of talking offline. It's like you don't do this work for very long and not veer into the mindset side of things, because you realize you can give strategy till someone's blue in the face. But if they're overwhelmed and they're stuck in self-doubt or criticism, or they don't believe it's possible for them, it's going to go in one ear and out the other.
Mhm.
So the mindset side of it is so, so important. And I think the mindset side of it encompasses the spiritual, the emotional, the mental health. We can't ignore that, because like it or not, I think that we're all kind of encompassed in this body, and the better our mental, spiritual, emotional health is, the better our physical health can be, and vice versa. I think it really all plays together.
Yes, absolutely. I use this with my clients all the time, and it is the 3 pillars of change, is what I call it. It is, your actions and behavior, your thoughts, and then your emotions, like how I don't always like to use manage emotions, because so many people think like, oh, then I can't feel anger. I gotta just, it's more of your response to your
Yep.
emotions, because your emotions are communicating things to you. And what we like to do is numb them
Mm-hmm.
or run from them, medicate them. I'm feeling sad. Give me something. I'm feeling angry. No,
Right.
it's trying to tell
Right.
you something.
Yes.
So what are you going to do about it? And it's simpler than we think. It's about responding to our life instead of reacting to things. So, look, like, let's take the thoughts, for example, when they come in your head and they're negative, they're critical, they're shaming, and you're full of doubt and worry and overwhelm, whatever it is, it's taking that and really questioning, just being curious with yourself. Well, why are you thinking that? Or whose voice is that really? Is that really a nice way to talk to yourself? And I think you have a choice every second of the day with our thoughts to either really do, am I a friend to myself? Is this really a loving way to speak to myself? Is this really going to empower me to do good things? Or am I literally beating myself up and tearing myself down before I can even get out there and accomplish anything in life? And it's totally within your control. Do I want to think this? Yes or no? What is a better thought? I mean, it could be about anything, right?
Yep.
The sky is blue. That's a good thought. I mean, anything to get you on that right track, but it's catching those thoughts. That's the biggest thing, because so many of us don't even think about how crummy our thoughts are. But then, too, that behavior and that action that follows that. So, what am I doing all the time to just, be in the best state of health? So, your actions, of course, that's the stuff that's so easy to look at. What are you eating? How are you exercising? How are you sleeping? How are you treating yourself? are you caring for your health? All of that. And then the third thing is of course our emotions. You know, how do we feel about ourselves? What's going on right now? If I'm always feeling anxiety or anger or, you know, whatever it is I'm feeling, then how am I going to respond to that? What am I doing to try to help myself? And it's those three things that I don't want to say, oh, it's so simple and it's so easy, but I feel like we just want to jump over all of that because we think it's too hard. And it's not. It's really about just slowing down and responding to life, responding to ourselves. And we live in this world where everything is so fast paced and I want the quick fix and I want it right now. And I mean, there's just consequences to everything. You can go out and, you know, it's the old saying, you can, what is it, have your cake and eat it too, or whatever. You can, but there's going to be consequences, right? And it's a constant choice.
Yeah. And there's consequences to your thoughts too. I mean, really, how your emotions are the consequence of your thoughts. And I think until we take full personal responsibility for our life and our choices and our emotions and our thoughts, I think that we limit our power to change. So if I could just like leave everybody with one thing, it's just don't be afraid to take responsibility for yourself and for your choices, and recognize that your emotions are caused by your thoughts. And that's a good thing because you can learn how to choose better thoughts and feel better.
And even just the thought of, I can be healthy. It's not this road that is about everything that I'm going to deny myself of, or, I'm going to put myself through this torturous exercise and deny myself from, enjoying life. And that's not it. And that's a whole mindset of this opens up quality of life. It opens up feeling good and, that having that zest and that energy and that drive and that ambition to just, live a really fulfilling life. And I think that is the mindset that we just need to have. This is for us to improve our lives, not punish ourselves, right?
Yes.
So most definitely. So real quick, I do want to talk about Zivli. Am I saying it right?
Yep.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's our diabetes prevention and reversal program. We open enrollment a couple times a year. So our next enrollment is January 2025. And then we'll also probably do September of 25. And we take people through a really great online course that I developed. There's weekly group coaching, and we teach you everything that you need to learn, all of this, the lifestyle system. So, what's your data system, your strategy system, your mindset system? How are you going to hold yourself accountable? It's like an accountability system. It's a really great program. So if they want to learn more about it, they can check out our website at zivli.com. And there's a wait list there with information. They can click and join the wait list.
Perfect. Yes. And I was looking on your Instagram, and I love you do have some of your members on your podcast or little clips and things like that. That's very cool. I love that.
Yep. We have a really nice membership. Very
Awesome.
lovely people. Yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been so informative, and all of the little things, that we talked about, the links, I'll put all of that in the show notes. And I feel like, yes, I have a lot more research I want to go and do too. So thank you for posing so many more questions though, and just opening our minds, because so much of this information, I just, people aren't aware of. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to the Authentically Raw podcast. I really appreciate you. And it is my sincere hope that you get value out of each and every conversation. And I would love it if you could leave a review. It helps tremendously. Also, I'm a life coach, in case you didn't know. Visit my website at jamieberris.com to learn more. I would love to work with you, help you get through whatever it is you're going through, or help you get to wherever it is you're seeking to go. And also, one last thing, I have a life coachy kind of book. It's called Results Daily Planning and Self-Development. You can find it through my website or head straight over to Amazon. As always, I'm rooting for you. Be real, be raw, be authentic.